Hi everyone. My topic today is about the power of non-official state actors. I believe this is a very important topic, not only for us as major students, but also for us as individuals. So I'm going to try to stick to the reading as much as possible, yet I might go a bit outside the box. So what are non-official state actors? We know that state actors are anything linked to the government. On the contrary, non-state actors are not. So, yet these non-state actors have a huge impact on how international relations work, on how society works, and of course on peacemaking and conflict. So, peacemaking has shed a light on new actors on the global scene. When we talk about non-official state actors, we have to understand that they are so far from the image given to them that they are powerless. Because the way they employ their sources and their abilities and their power does not prove that they are powerless, especially when it comes to conflict resolution. So this reading sheds a light on their importance and how they work in this mediation process. Now it's weird how we put power and mediation together, but the link here is not understood as we know as power in the bad aspect, but we have to put it as a positive aspect. When an actor has power, that means he has the ability to change. This is how you have to understand it in this reading, not the power to impose a will on someone, or to have the power as in not letting someone to make you do what he wants to do. So here power has a good notion as in having the ability to change. And this is exactly what non-official state actors do have nowadays, but are underestimated doing so. So when it comes to mediation, we know it as letting party A and party B discuss instead of fight, and talk, to communicate, to negotiate, to put a middle ground, to find a middle ground. And these types of non-official organizations like NGOs come here as a part to make sure that that happens instead of referring to violence or resorting to violence. Now, the thing about non-state actors is that they do not have a territory, authority, legitimacy like state actors do. So how again do they have an impact on mediation and conflict resolution? The held view of them is that they don't have the tools to threaten a country and by imposing sanctions or using force, etc. They don't have what the state has. And yet, they cannot offer the international legitimacy that UN, for example, or any regional organization does. Like, usually the UN, if there's a certain conflict, the simple thing it could do is recognize this conflict or recognize that this party is an enemy. Non-state actors do not have the power to do so. So what kind of power do they have that helps them in mediation? So here comes the 6 bases of power and mediation that they actually use. There's the informational power, the expert power, the referent power, legitimate power, reward power, and coercive power. We're going to dig deep into each one of them so that we understand how these non-state official actors process the mediation process or have an impact on conflicts on the global scene. So the first form of power is informational power. Informational power relies on the ability of the actor to access information that parties want or need, and also transmit messages between party A and party B. Non-official state actors were able to help articulate the parties' needs and find common areas for negotiation. And the best example for informational power is Betty Bigambe. Betty Bigambe is a woman that was in the Uganda government, and after her time finished, she put it upon herself for 23 years from her own money to make sure that the war stops between the rebels and the government in Uganda. She, as a woman alone, went to the forest where the rebels were, a huge army of men, and tried to negotiate and make them stop the peace. At first it was hard because they looked at her as a gender issue. She's a woman, she has no clue what she's talking about, she has no role in wars, she shouldn't be here. But then Bigambe talked to them as a mother. She talked to them with feelings, and she got to them at a point, and they started respecting her. She had influence on them. This is the word, influence. And believe it or not, this individual was able to stop a war and let the rebels move out of northern Uganda, and she helped rebuild peace in this area after seeing women get raped, children be killed, people losing their body, their hands, their legs, their lives, and she was able to make a difference. And here comes the notion of power. This is real power, being able to change when people think that you can't do that, you cannot change. And that's an amazing, amazing thing to look at. And again, it's a woman, so this is like a multi-sided victory. Now, the second form of power is the expert power. This power is kind of tricky because it's making the parties believe that this mediator is very knowledgeable and experienced in the conflict or issue at hand. Now, this could be something positive and it could be something negative, because sometimes I could look at you as an expert, but other times I might look at you as a manipulator of your knowledge. And here comes a conflict when it comes to the parties. So, because each conflict can be, when it's experienced, it's different than a third party looking from it at the outside. For example, the economic crisis today in Lebanon, we can look at it as, if we're in Lebanon, we know how hard it is. But for example, someone expert from the IMF coming and telling us, yeah, I know it's hard, and you could do this and you could do that. We're going to look at him and you're like, okay, but you don't know what it feels like. So conflicts are experienced. So it's not only just, we can like read history, but we would never know what it's really like to live it. So that also happened for, I'm actually working as a research assistant in Iraq with the USIP, someone in the USIP, a member in the USIP, and we faced a problem because, so the team was doing interviews with certain members and the governors of each, in Ninwa, in Diyala, in Mosul, and so on. And at first, they were looking at the USIP as experts of their fields, trying to bring peace to the society. But then they had a conflict that, wait a minute, you're Americans, there's something behind what you're doing. You want something else from us. 3 people decided not to go through the interviews or talk to these people who were trying to interview them, only because they overthought their expertise and looked at it as manipulation. There's something behind this. There's an agenda working behind this, and they refuse to cooperate. So sometimes being an expert can backfire at you, and it needs trust. It needs trust from the parties so they can actually work with you. Now, the third kind of power is the referent power. Referent power is based on respect. I respect you, so I listen to you. Or based on an experience. You never put me down before, so I'm going to listen to you again because now there's a sort of bond or a trust between me and you, and because now you understand me better. So, Jimmy Carter is one of the examples of people who used referent power through history. He helped cease the fire in Bosnia, and also he had a part in the Uganda conflict and so on. Now, when we talk about America using referent power, it's also very, very, very debatable, especially with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Now, Israelis are most likely to listen to the US because they are allies. But Palestinians, some people look at it because I'm going to listen to the US because they have the tendency to move Israel towards peace and because US could provide us aid. Yet, some other people look at it, no, it's an ally of Israel, they're the enemies. So it actually depends on the perspective, and here comes the perspective of respect as well. So it does differ from a party to the other. It's a case-by-case scenario, and it differs between an individual and another, playing the part as a mediator. The fourth kind of power is the legitimate power. When you give legitimacy to something, you give it the right to have the power. So when you want to look at it on the conflict resolution aspect, I'm giving this person the right to interfere between my conflict with party B. Okay, so I'm okay with him interfering. And sometimes you give legitimacy to a person who doesn't say he wants it, because that would make him look like someone who wants to come and control. But when you give it to someone who's out of it completely, you kind of have a better understanding that this person will come in and understand me as party A and party B, and not just come and impose what he thinks is right. So, of course, also this is a very debatable aspect on agreeing who a third party is, and of course giving legitimacy to this person, because at the end of the day, when it comes to non-official state actors, it's different to give legitimacy to a person than to a state. So this is why it's also complicated. And of course, for example, party A could say, I don't want this third party to be the mediator, although I have nothing to do with him, or there's no conflict between me and him, yet I don't think he would understand me as a party B. So I wouldn't want him to be there and change the negotiations to favor someone else's side. So this is also a very sensitive kind of power that kind of needs, it's also again based on trust. Now, when it comes to reward and coercive powers, which are 5 and 6, we merged them here because as a state, it's easy for me to threat, okay, and put sanctions on someone who wouldn't want to listen to me. But as a non-state actor, I don't have the power to do so. Like, I can't impose military sanctions or put a scenario for a certain actor to fear me, because I don't have the power to do so. Yet, when I am a big NGO, for example, my thoughts do matter, because I am providing aid for you. I'm the one who can stay on your side when no one else is, so you don't want to lose me. So here comes a built-in kind of need. Like, if this NGO leaves me, I'm going to be isolated as an actor. So I wouldn't want her to leave the side of me and negotiations with the other party. So sometimes in conflicts, NGOs and non-official actors play a great role in becoming the right stand, or maybe even a tool for these actors to communicate rather than be isolated on their own. So, although there are no robust powers, non-official organizations should recognize them as elements that they can use in the attempt to focus antagonists' attention on the benefits of negotiation and the cost of its collapse. So here, the non-official actors put out the need for negotiations instead of violence, because sometimes the parties do not even afford going to violence, and it's not in their interest to do so, or else they will collapse as well. So negotiations will come first, and this is how the NGOs can use reward and coercive power in a way, like put out incentives. If you do that, I'm going to stay on your side. If you don't, I'm out, and you might you might lose this conflict. So yeah, even if it's not a state actor, it does have the power to use those two kind of powers. Okay, so we have talked about the nature of the mediator's influence, yet that is not enough. How do they use these powers to increase their influence? How do they apply the resources they have on helping solve the conflict at hand? Here comes the word leverage. So leverage in its meaning is used as a synonym for power, but again I repeat that power in this reading is not the increase of use of force, but instead the meaning of it lies in the power to produce effect by indirect means, without using force, without resorting to violence. So this is also something to repeat as a reminder throughout this reading, that power does not have a negative notion, it has a positive one. So as I said, that leverage is the power to produce effect by indirect means, as to increase influence and being able to stay in control of those conflicted parties, for them not to resort to violence. And we could say that leverage is a result of three things. The first thing is combining powers, the second is skillful use of powers, and third of all, parties' confidence of the mediator. So, what does that mean? When we say about combining powers, what do I have as means, or as how many non-official actors or third parties I could put inside this conflict to like increase the level of negotiation or communication between the parties. And when we say skillful use of powers, how do I know how to make you negotiate? Do I have to talk to each party alone? Do I have to make them meet up? Do I have to discuss individually with each actor of the conflict, etc.? So each non-official actor has his role and skill in how to make sure those parties end up on peaceful terms. Last but not least, but I think is the most important, is the party's confidence in the mediator. Again, the notion of trust. If the parties don't trust me as a mediator, we're not going to get anywhere. They have to see something in me that I am able to guide them through the right track, or else there's going to be a lot of other conflicts other than the main conflict at hand. Okay, now whether the mediator is an official state actor or not, it does not matter what his background is, who supports him, what's his resources, as much as it matters about the environment of the conflict. Here we use the word ripe. Being a ripe conflict, we can think of it as a fruit. A fruit on a tree does not fall and hit the ground unless it's too ripe. Same thing with conflict resolution. If the conflict at hand is not ripe enough to reach the ground or to reach a solution, then it's going to be taking extra efforts, extra time, extra leveraging is going to be way more hard than actually trying to solve a conflict whose environment is ripe enough to want to go to peace. So here the mediator comes, and his role is to try to manipulate incentives and disincentives and try to shift the vision of the parties from resorting to violence and giving them a better view that, see, negotiations is better for you than violence. And of course, that's why it's a case-by-case scenario depending on the environment of the conflict. Does it need more work to reach this ripeness, or is it already too ripe that it's going to directly be solved? Human rights organizations throughout the years have worked on changing the international agenda, and we can say they kind of did. What these non-official organizations have done is that increased pressure on international actors or state actors themselves to interfere in case of humanitarian crises like crimes against humanity, genocides, etc. But that is not also, because they have that much of influence, they were able to sometimes contact lawmakers inside each country and even put pressure enough to change the law itself. And this is a huge act forward for non-official actors to be able to reach governmental issues. Yet, the way they changed the international agenda is that they increased the pressure on the importance of interference of other states in when it comes to crimes against humanity. Despite that not being always effective, like the Rwanda genocide, for example, we cannot blame the non-official actors. The non-official actors did what they have to do, raised awareness, put pressure, worked on the ground, yet who failed was the international system's effectiveness in interfering based on the challenges they have as sovereignty, legitimacy, etc. But that it does not make non-official actors powerless. In fact, it raises a question on the power of state actors themselves. And the thing with NGOs and non-official actors in general is that sometimes they are more powerful than the state itself. Best example that we have all witnessed recently is the Beirut explosion, August 4th. Where was the state? Now, of course, Lebanon is an exceptional state as a failed country, but that does not erase the duty that the government had in being on the ground that day. So here comes the importance that NGOs have something called field workers. They see the disaster on the ground. And I mentioned earlier that experiencing a conflict is different than talking about it from the outside. So what I think, I believe actually, is that field workers are the most effective when it comes to conflict resolution and trying to help out like directly. And that's what we did as Lebanese citizens. The state was not there. We're the ones who helped the families after the Beirut explosion. We built Beirut again. And it's something to be proud of, to know that as an individual, I do have more power than a government. And here, the power again is not the use of force. I mentioned the power is being able to cause a change. And if you don't think that is power, then you have to redefine your abilities. And I think we mentioned it in previous human rights classes, is that all it takes is to have the heart. And it differs than having a heart. To have the heart is having the will to act. To go on the ground, to help people directly, not just sit and nag about it. I know I can make a change and I believe in peace. Then I don't just sit and watch and wait for peace to happen. I make peace happen. And we as non-official actors, as an individuals, have a role in doing so as well, and not just complaining about issues. We could act out. And this is when I come and say that in conflict resolutions, we can come to be more powerful than states themselves. As civil society members themselves, non-official organizations are well situated to promote capacity building within conflicted societies. This capacity building might take the form of encouraging the growth of civil society, building local capacity for peacemaking by improving mediation and negotiation skills to help soften the ways of communication. Moreover, it can be by training local officials in management and problem solving and strengthening the support of law and democratic institutions. Also, it helps by working with educational authorities and others to reform education. Why? Because it all starts with education. It's not a one-day change. Development and democracy is not a one-day issue. It's a generational process, and it starts with the mindset that you put inside the youth. You want them to change, you have to let them change by starting with them. And actually, the tasks that these non-official actors do are from all sorts: expert, legitimate, and informational powers that we mentioned before. And what these non-official actors also do is that they practice the soft power that we talked about in theory with Joseph Nye. And this soft power can come in a form of adopting ideas of change to change the behavior between the society members. That I'm not going to fight you, I'm going to talk to you. I'm not going to go kill you, I'm going to negotiate, and we might meet halfway there to find a solution. You change, this soft power comes in handy in trying to change behavior and how society functions on a daily basis. I'd like to end this presentation by saying that it all starts with you as a human being. It's one thing to be a person, it's another thing to be a human, because humans have to have the heart. And we talked about it in a human rights class. I don't know who took it, but we said that to have the heart is to have the will to act. And change does not happen if we don't want to change. I could see posters everywhere that we should change, we should become better people. But if I'm not going to be doing that starting with myself, then what do I expect from society? What do I expect from a conflict at hand to reach soft or peaceful ground if I don't know how to do so? So we have the power sometimes more than states do, and this is enough to take action. This is enough to want to be the power itself. And again, power, as I mentioned before in previous slides, that it is the ability to cause a change, and we have the ability to cause a change. We can be the main facilitator of change, if not the change itself. So please don't underestimate yourself. Don't underestimate non-official state actors as a whole, because I believe they are the real solution nowadays. They are the real influence, and it starts with us, humans, and then it goes up to other bigger entities, because it all starts with us anyway. I hope you liked the presentation, and thank you for listening.